Special Operations Training Detachment, SOT D West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. All right, so how do you prepare for a rotation? How do you get set up and be the most lethal fighting force you can be while communicating what needs to be communicated to the conventional force? Well, fighting products is a part of that, and with us today to discuss what that is and what that can look like is Major Phil Ficken, Burrow 07.
Hello.
And he's been on the podcast before, so no need to do a long intro, but he's the OIC, or officer in charge of the Burrow team, and he's finishing out his time as Burrow 07, and he's going to go on to some great things here in the near future, but right now he's going to talk about fighting products. So what's your takeaway on what is a fighting product?
Yeah, absolutely. So a fighting product is just a visual product created by a staff to help commanders understand the operational environment, visualize the battlefield, and synchronize action in time and space. It's supporting decision-making, it's supporting common understanding, and that's at the core what a fighting product is. And I'll tell you, here at NTC, when I'm out there coaching AOBs, this is one of the most common coaching focuses that I've really talked with every single company-level staff about to some extent. And there may be some reasons for that, but as a former AOB commander myself, when I think back at the amount of training time that we had available to train on staff work, it was less than I would have liked. And so when companies in particular come out here to NTC and train, this is definitely something that I think every company will find this applicable. So I really do hope that AOBs, or if you're on an AOB, or even if you're down at ODA, you could really listen to this and have a baseline of what you can create, what you can use as a fighting product to help support that common understanding, decision-making, synchronization, and all that.
Yeah, and our civil affairs and PSYOP counterparts as well.
100%.
And their roles if they're attached to a Special Forces AOB or ODA.
Absolutely.
So before we dive into this,
yes,
you did come here as a AOB commander and did a rotation, right?
I sure did. And I got coached on this, on these exact talking points when I was here. So it really hasn't changed much. The principles remain the same, right? We always talk about going back to the basics. So this is one of the aspects of the basics when it comes to being an operational staff.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't going to be groundbreaking. Any officer or senior NCO has probably been exposed to these things before, but it's about just, hey, there's a reason why doctrine says to make X, Y, and Z while you're doing the military decision-making process.
Yeah.
And they actually have a use. It's not just back in garrison. So we'll just dive in and we'll talk about what those things are and then best practices with them. So, 100%. Sir, what are the minimum fighting products you think or you coach company leadership on when they come out here?
Absolutely. So I really believe that there are 6 basic fighting products that you should start with as an operational headquarters, particularly at the company level. And as I caveat this, as we jump into it, I really think that battalion staffs understand fighting products pretty well, and they've got the MOS specific people to be able to make it happen very effectively. And so the intel guy understands the intel fighting products very well, down the line. The fires guy understands the fires fighting products. But at the AOB level, you've got, even at the civil affairs or PSYOP, company headquarters level, you don't necessarily have those specific MOS specialty folks to do this. So that's where I think this coaching point comes in. So really 6 different fighting products. I'm going to start off with the one that probably everyone is thinking of if you've ever worked on a staff, and that's going to be the Common Operating Picture, or COP, which I'm going to do a slash and combine that with the Common Intelligence Picture, or SIP. So when we talk about the COP SIP, that's really just a display over a map that includes the critical information about friendly and enemy forces, again, allowing commanders to make those operational decisions. So if you've seen one of these before, you're going to see a map that's got some unit symbols. We've got in the Army standard unit symbols. we'll put those over top the templated locations of those respective friendly enemy forces, along with some tactical mission graphics to show in the operation what tasks each of these units may be doing. So that's what you can expect to see on a SIP cop. And I'm going to take a slight rabbit trail for a second too, because the other thing that you'll see are what I'll call overlays on the common operating picture. And we call them overlays. If you can imagine a physical map on a table, and we'll take these clear sheets of acetate and with map markers draw symbols or icons on there, so you can literally overlay this clear plastic sheet over top of your map and get a subset of information to add to that friendly and enemy, the friendly enemy diagrams on there. That's what I mean when I say an overlay. And really a integral part of the common operating picture are those overlays. And that's going to vary by operation, what types of overlays you'll have. But, some common example are going to be like your fires and effects overlay.
Yeah.
On there, for example, you would have, maybe target reference points or, different things that are going to help you to understand what the fires plan is. Or you might have a civil overlay that has some key civil infrastructure on there, sustainment overlay. You get the idea. You could create a list of different overlays based on what type of operation, what aspects you need to display in order to support that common understanding and decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. With Mo Bogert, we talked about a medical overlay on
Absolutely.
top of that. And I would really encourage the team level, detachment level, across the board, CA, PSYOP, and SF to actually make this and bring it out to the field with you. It's not something we're really trained on, like through the Q course, through Ranger School, anything like that, but like have that map out, use it to brief the team, use it to brief your partner force, and then as a team leadership, it's like helps you just visualize the battle space and think further in time and space.
Yeah, well, and that's a good caveat, as we transition to really what I would say is the second fighting product that every headquarters needs to have, which is your execution matrix. And the execution matrix graphs your operations along time. So think of if the y-axis is your a list of your operations and the x-axis is time, then this is kind of a block diagram along that graph of your operations. And really the best practice is to use this to map yourself out to 72 hours. This is often a struggle with any soft headquarters element we have.
Absolutely.
Because things change so frequently in the large scale combat operation environment that we, and that's our scenario here at NTC. So as things change very frequently, sometimes it feels like a losing endeavor to try and plan out 72 hours. But the reality is you really need to have a game plan going out to 72 hours. Otherwise you've got nothing to shift off of. And you start to miss opportunities to synchronize your operations and align them in the planning process with everything else on the battlefield.
Yeah, and then as a commander, that's, you got to be nested with your higher headquarters in state, and then you need to tell your subordinate leaders, like, these are the decision points I need to make. So if and when things change on the battlefield, you can update that execution matrix and adjust to the what's going on the ground.
Absolutely.
And then move forward.
Absolutely. And it prevents us from being in that reactionary mode as well, which is one of the definite risks of not planning out ahead. So it's very easy to respond to what's happening, but we want to get ahead of that and really take the initiative. And this is a tool that helps us to do that more effectively.
Yeah. So, all right, we got COP and execution matrix. What's next?
All right. So number 3 is going to be your information collection matrix, or the ICM. And this is something that the Intel folks out there are going to be very familiar with. And really, it's a worksheet that systematically outlines how friendly forces are going to answer priority information requirements, both by time and method of collection. So what I mean by this is, think of a worksheet, and you might have your priority information requirements listed along the left side. And then throughout the different columns of this worksheet, it's going to go through what that information requirement is, where it is, when you need to collect on it, what asset you're going to use to collect that information, and you might think of, okay, I'm going to use a UAV to fly over a place and look at something and answer a question about it. Or I'm going to have a guy who I know, who I'm working with, who's going to go and talk to a buddy that he knows in a different area and get some information from him. It could be any variety of ways that you could get that information.
Yeah, and that UAV, UAS kind of mentality might not be, in the initial phases of large-scale combat, might not be available. Like, if you're a detachment, forward of the friendly line of troops, you might have a small UAS that you can use, but it's dangerous. It poses risk to use that.
Absolutely.
If you're the company and you're behind the forward line of troops, like, maybe you can request something from a higher echelon, but you might not be able to use it. So whatever assets you have or potentially could request, like, jot those down in there and see what you can make happen.
And this really brings up a really important point when it comes to special operations working with conventional forces too, because special operations in the large scale combat operation framework are going to have, on the one hand, we may have our own forces in the deep operations area and inside of enemy territory that can answer things, see things that the conventional force doesn't have people positioned to see. We talk about deep sensing. They might be able to have some deep sensing, but also we are working by, with, and through partner forces and surrogates. So special operations have a lot of ways of answering the mail on something like this information collection matrix that without SOF, the conventional force might not have access to. So this is one of the ways that special operations really supports the joint force maneuver by answering things that no one else can answer.
Yeah, absolutely. We can be a sensor for another entity.
Absolutely.
And answer a PIR that we're not even aware of.
Yep.
Just by normal reporting requirements.
Yes.
All right. So we knocked out information collection matrix. We'll go on to the next one.
All right, number 4. So number 4 on the list is the high payoff target list, or the HPTL. And so what this is a prioritized list of enemy high value targets whose loss will significantly contribute to the success of your friendly force course of action. And specifically, you're going to select things for this list that are able to be both acquired and engaged, meaning that you know that you have the ability to find out what this thing is, where it is, et cetera, and do something about it. If you don't have any way to affect it, then it's not going to make its way onto the HPTL. So if
your echelon.
For your echelon. Yeah. So if you listen to the episode about critical vulnerabilities analysis, really that episode is going to do a deep dive on how things are developed that are going to end up on the HPTL list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is it just copy and paste from higher echelon or the joint force, or do you coach them on, hey, can you actually affect this particular HPTL target that division cares about?
No, that's a great point, because at the end of the day, every headquarters is going to have their own HPTL based on what they can see and what they can affect and what they want to affect. And so SOF will, all special operations are likely to find themselves in a scenario where they're going to look at everyone else's HPTL. They're going to look, in our scenario, if you've got a company level headquarters that's fighting next to a conventional armored brigade, that brigade is going to have a HPTL at their level. The division above them is going to have a HPTL. And then on the SOF side, that company's higher headquarters, maybe they've got a battalion special operations task force or a SOTF above them, or a siege SOTF above that, or a SIGITF above that. Each echelon is going to have their own HPTL. So it is the duty of your headquarters to look at all these other things and really crosstalk. And we see a lot of good stuff happen when a company level SOF headquarters talks with a brigade level or division level conventional headquarters, and they talk about, hey, what are your gaps? What can you not affect that the special operations teams can affect?
Yeah.
And we're going to try and target those HPTL. So basically, to your point, Weston, really getting to refining a HPTL for your echelon is a key part of this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it does the critical factors analysis and or Carver analysis can really pinpoint, do you want to destroy it? Do you want to neutralize it? Do you want to disrupt it? What are you actually doing? And then really quick, back to the common operating picture, hey, bonus points if you use doctrine, Army terms and graphics, so that you can communicate to the conventional force or the joint force what you're actually doing instead of just
100%.
drawing pictures on a map. And then
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll jump to target sync matrix and fire support execution matrix.
Yeah. So, and I think I might have mentioned as an example the fires overlay, right? But there's a fighting product, and there's a couple of different versions or different types of fighting product that you might use. But I think the most common is going to be your target sync matrix or your fire support execution matrix. And I'm not going to go into the details of what exactly is on here, but the bottom line of it is that it's a worksheet that's going to outline how the unit is going to decide, detect, deliver, and assess fires and effects against enemy high payoff targets. And it's a deliberate methodology that a commander gets to inject his intent on how you're going to use the resources available to be able to have an effect on the target. And that could be lethal or non-lethal. So we're not just talking about the artillery piece that shoots a artillery round and destroys something. This could also be a different kind of non-lethal effect. Could be an information effect, could be a cyber effect. Take your pick on a different type of
the triad
effect.
or any of the myriad of other things in the
That's
information space. I mean, it could also be with the intent of being a positive effect instead of a negative effect. Like
that's right.
If civil affairs goes out and gets food for a population, and then they, prefer the coalition force or something to that effect.
Right. Right.
But it's non-lethal is a huge or non-kinetic. There's a huge array of different things you could do there.
So this helps you to just organize all those things and prioritize them based on resources available too. And, as you get into the details, the fires officers and NCOs out there are really going to get into the details of, okay, if we meet these conditions on this type of target, I'm going to use this type of round out of this type of gun.
Yeah.
They'll get into
LODAC and all that.
100%. So this is kind of the wave top is, how does the commander prioritize and have a systematic approach to prioritizing how we're going to put effects on targets on the battlefield?
Yeah. And then the last minimum required fighting product, in your opinion, sir?
Yeah, so the last one that I'm going to say for the minimum fighting products is going to be the logistics status, or log stat, if you've heard that term. So this is just a status report that provides a snapshot of the current on-hand status and future requirements for commodities of sustainment that you're going to need to accomplish the mission. And every echelon should be producing this. And, there's some different stats. We hear log stat, com stat, there's some different stats, but log stat, I think, especially for soft headquarters fighting in LSCO, is especially important to communicate up and down, because at the end of the day, you're going to end up with teams that are in non-permissive or denied environments that need to be resupplied. That's a very complex operation, potentially, depending on what, where they are, what they're doing, and getting stuff to them is not as simple as just putting it in the back of a truck and driving it to them. You may have to cross into enemy territory. You may have to figure out non-standard ways to get stuff to people. So,
that may take like 3 days.
That's
just
right.
To get a bottle of water from point A to point B.
That's right. So we talked about the XMAT going out to at least 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same story. You really need to, and 72 hours, depending on how fast your ways to deliver sustainment to your units, 72 hours may not even be close to enough. You may have to go even further out than that, depending on how fast you can do different types of resupply. So this is a definite focus when elements come out here and train at NTC. It's important for the conventional force just as much, but for soft force, there's some specific challenges of how you get things to ODAs in particular that are behind enemy lines, and it takes time and some creativity.
So just to recap, common operating picture or common intelligence picture with all the various overlays you can imagine: execution matrix, information collection matrix, high payoff target list, target sync matrix / fire support matrix, and logistics or log stat. And then what other products could be helpful?
Yeah, so after you start with those baseline products, and that's what we coach to start with, based on what you're doing, who you have within your staff, how much staff bandwidth you have, and whatever other factors you need to take into account. I'm going to just rattle off, and I'm not going to go in detail, but I'm going to rattle off some additional fighting products that might be helpful to you. So once you get to that baseline point, do your research. All these are easily, you can look them up in Doctrine, or you could probably even Google them. And you could use these to help build that common understanding, support decision-making, and all that. So, okay. So I'm just going to rattle them off here. Decision support matrix is one. We see that pretty often out here. Commanders will choose to do a decision support matrix. Execution checklists for specific missions. And that's going to be, a very finite operation type of execution checklist with the key information for that mission. Air Hope timelines. We interact with Air Force, aviation, all kinds of air assets that we may be supporting them, they're supporting us, whatever the case may be. So that is a key thing that we might put up there. Light and weather data. Easy to look up. I think, on my personal life, I look that up on my phone about every day, but it applies to operations just as much and has effects to give advantages to us or to the enemy that we need to take into consideration. Okay, we've got information requirements. So this is something that might be useful to display. I think probably a headquarters who's using a standard operations process is going to have their priority information requirements. We talk about PIR, CCIR, and FFIR. And so the PIR, priority information requirements, CCIR, commanders, critical information requirements, FFIR, friendly forces information requirements. And I'm not going to go into what each of those is. That's probably a whole conversation in and of itself, but those are another one that you could display. The next one is task organization, particularly if you have a very complex task organization with a task force that has been put together from a lot of different types of elements. This may be really important for you. I'd say the simpler your task organization is, probably the less needed this would be. So when we talk about like the ODA or team detachment, depending on what type of element you are, probably not needed at that level. You get up to the company headquarters level, like an AOB, you might need it at that level. Once you get to like a battalion or special operations task force level, you probably need this displayed somewhere, or at least accessible somewhere. And then the last one that I'll mention is combat power, that goes hand in hand with task organization. And really combat power is just, metrics that help you measure how much, combat effectiveness you can put into the fight at that given time. And this is something we actually use less in special operations, but I see it be at the center of what conventional forces are looking at. And particularly when we talk about armored brigade combat teams that come out here to train. I mean, they are constantly talking about combat power, and for good reason, because they need to know exactly how many tanks are in the fight, how many Bradleys are in the fight.
Say, it's not just personnel for them, it's vehicles.
Oh, 100%. What's down for maintenance? When is it expected to come back up? So those are really important factors for them. But for special operations, we might have the same sort of considerations with different types of equipment or different types of capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they bring like one specific piece of equipment tailored for a, hey, we're going to do a space mission, or we're going to do a whatever.
Right.
And it goes down. That's probably FFIR.
It could be.
Or CCIR. But yeah, I was going to add to the combat power that at NTC and JRTC, especially on the conventional side, like not only do they have maintenance and like real things happen to their vehicles, they also lose them in the simulated force-on-force battle.
That's right.
They lose personnel in the simulated force-on-force battle. Less so for special operations, because we try to tailor and be more discreet about what missions we're selecting, so that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we're going up against a larger force. So we take simulated casualties less often, but it does happen, and that, soldier, partner force, whoever is potentially out of the fight for an extended period of time. So if you're an ODA out there in the deep, you got 10 to 12 guys on the team, and then maybe 10 to 12 partner force. Losing, one or two in a direct action kind of mission is a big deal, and it's something that you can't really overcome.
So we're probably not going to keep track of how many. Well, we might at the SOTF level, we might, but at the company level, we may not be as concerned with the number of GMV 1.1s that we've got operational out of the total subset of all the ODAs. But we are going to be very concerned with the combat power of each ODA as a unit.
Yeah.
And they're going to be hitting us in their log stat with, hey, I'm down a vehicle. I need help with this. And we're going to have to solve that as a problem. So really everything is a problem set that we got to find a unique and creative solution to, which is one of the things that makes special operations great, is that every day is a new problem and you get to come up with creative answers on how to solve them.
Yeah. And your log stat can have some maintenance in there. If they need a part, if they need a new vehicle, tire goes flat, whether real world or simulated. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this interview with Major Phil Ficken, where we discussed the 6 essential and the additional recommended fighting products for execution of large-scale combat operations at the CTCs. In the next episode, Major Ficken and I will discuss the pros and cons of digital and analog products. Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where ARSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform.
Actions will determine the outcome.